Good evening, Cedar Falls, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, April 5th. I'll now call this meeting to order. And tonight's agenda item is a College Hill Vision Plan presentation, which is scheduled for 90 minutes. That's being handled by Farrell Madden, our consulting firm, and we're happy to have them with us tonight via Zoom. To start us off, Karen Howard will provide introductions. Ms. Howard, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We're very pleased tonight to bring to you the culmination of a year-long process of the College Hill Vision Plan. We have for you tonight our consultant team, Mary Madden and Jeff Farrell. They'll be joining us on Zoom for the presentation of the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommended draft. This, as you know, went through the Planning and Zoning Commission, had several meetings at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we made a few tweaks based on the input there. And we're here tonight to present their recommended draft. Thank you.
Karen, are we ready to start with us? Yes, go ahead, Mary. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to talk to you tonight. I am Mary Madden with Farrell Madden, and we're going to give you a whirlwind tour of the work we've been doing now almost the last 15 months. I believe Jeff is going to share our presentation on the screen. It was working, or there.
We have it?
Yes, we can see it fine.
Yep, thank you. As I said, we're here to talk to you about Imagine College Hill. This is the current draft based on the 15 months of work and the feedback we received during the planning and zoning review process. Next. As many of you may remember, back in January of 2020, the Council adopted a set of priorities for this project. I won't read them here for you, but this is the starting point for us to delve into College Hill and our engagement with the public. Next. One thing I really want to remind you is this is the Imagine College Hill plan. But the area that we were looking at is considerably larger than most people probably think of as College Hill. So it's not just the business district that's right to the northeast of the campus. It's also the adjacent neighborhoods to the north, to the east, and to the southwest. So that's important as we go through the ideas that are in the plan. Next. Tonight we're going to give you an overview walkthrough of the plan document itself, covering a few of the highlights. These are the major sections that are in the plan, and we're going to touch on each of those and then present some of the vision ideas. Next. The plan starts off with an overview of the whole project and process and includes these recommendations. These are a range of things from design implications to policy considerations. These really came out of the work we did with the community as well as the analysis we did there on the ground and then work that we did off-site. I do want to emphasize that we built on work that the College Hill Partnership has had underway now for a couple of decades and then carried forward with that. Next. So the plan itself covers the visioning process and then the recommendations that came out of it. Next. As I said, we started in January of 2020. Little did we know how much the world would change over the next several months, but we started by looking at the history, previous neighborhood plans. We were out there on some bitter cold days in January, walking the streets, the neighborhoods, taking a look at what was going on. We also had a kickoff event at the CEE on the campus there where folks came in. We did some exercises. People identified strengths and weaknesses for the College Hill area, things they liked, things they didn't like. Next. In addition, we worked off-site. We had an economist on our team who looked at demographics and market conditions. We had a transportation planner who looked at mobility and also reviewed the recently completed parking plan for College Hill. And then we also looked at the existing zoning for College Hill, both the base zoning and the College Hill overlay. Next. We were just preparing to come back to Cedar Falls to do a big visioning charrette process there at the Hearst Center, and literally about 10 days before we were coming back, as you all know, everything shut down for the pandemic, and so we worked with staff figuring out how to move ahead because we didn't want to lose momentum, but we also wanted to make sure we were able to engage with students. So we basically put the whole project on a little bit of a hiatus. We continued doing background work to the extent we could, but then we came back virtually to Cedar Falls in October of 2020 when I know we talked with several of you during the virtual charrette process. Next, our team was working off-site. Here you may recognize a few faces. We started off with a hands-on public process, if you can do that virtually, where we had folks join us via Zoom, and we went into breakout rooms and really looked in a little more detail at the maps, the aerial photos of the area where people gave us recommendations. During the week, we also had a couple of virtual studio visits where people could drop in and ask questions about what we were working on. We had a range of technical meetings from meeting with the transit folks, talking to a lot of property owners, landlords, et cetera, talked with public works folks. We also did an online student survey. We had some engagement in that way. We were not able to really go to campus. And then we wrapped up the week with the work in progress presentation about everything we had completed during the virtual charrette week that actually stretched, I think, into about 10 days. Next. One of the things that I want to highlight, this is some of the background information that's really important for this plan. Our economist was reminding us always to keep everything realistic. The most important thing is to remember that the future of the College Hill area is just really going to be related to the future of UNI. The enrollment there is really going to be important for this neighborhood area. Some new housing could be supported, but it's not like you could bring in a lot more housing that'll just, you can't really support that because the university's enrollment has been down and hopefully is now stable. We also heard a lot about the people wanting to have a bigger retail base and more diverse retail, and we were reminded that that depends on having literally more people, more roofs closer to the business on College Hill. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The idea of connecting Lower and Upper Hill, again, is important because businesses actually develop synergy as people go to multiple businesses. There's a lot of energy that's created. And then the idea of really improving some of the public spaces, we heard a lot about that as well, and that can really impact the retail and dining market for a district. From that and looking at the parking study that you had done and our transportation folks, we really realized that there needs to be an overall strategy on College Hill. It's not just one thing. People want walkability. They want to have more retail and dining possibilities, but you need more people to do that. And then also, if you need more people, you have to figure out how are they all going to park in this small area. We heard a lot about the city and UNI's parking systems not really syncing up with each other, so that was another thing that we tried to look at. And then last but not least, the idea, as the area continues to grow and improve, a slightly different approach to managing parking might need to be considered. Next. Coming out of the virtual charrette, really building on what we heard from the community and then our analysis and research, these are the big ideas that we worked to build the plan around. Stabilizing and enhancing the neighborhoods around the university. We heard that a lot from students. We heard it from residents. We heard it from business owners. The idea to concentrate and intensify students closer to campus, which would then also help to achieve, number one, stabilizing those neighborhoods, reconnecting the lower and upper hill, taking greater emphasis in treating the natural areas as amenities. We heard about a few different areas people thought were sort of underutilized. Again, the idea that parking needs to be managed better, walkability was key. We heard a lot about bicycling on the hill, and the bicycling community in Cedar Falls was very well represented throughout this process. And again, we heard a lot about people wishing there were a wider variety and more retail and dining options on College Hill. So those are the big ideas that sort of underpin the visioning work and the design work that our team did. Next. This is a little side note because it's important for the vision plan moving forward, and that's the idea, the concept of character areas. We saw from our beginning context analysis, and we heard from folks who lived and worked on the Hill, the entire study area is not the same from east to west, north to south. So we started breaking that down into what we call character areas. And when we think about that, we're not just thinking about zoning districts. We're thinking physically, what is the place like today, and what could it be like in the future? So that's the big things to keep in mind. Next. So as I said, when we're thinking about character areas, we're not just thinking about land use categories. The image here, these are row houses. They're the same density. We can all look at them and say they're really different, so they have different characters. Next. Similarly, these are, chain retail, national chain retail, again, but they are in really different forms. Their relationship to the street is really different. So, again, same use, fundamentally different character. Next. And then another piece that when you think about the character, it's really important to think it's not just the private development, it's also the public realm. And typically the public realm is the area from the fronts of the private properties out into the right-of-way. So it's how that public space and the private space relate to each other, how the private development defines and shapes the public realm. Next. Or sometimes if the private development has not much relationship, it fails to sort of develop and shape the public realm. Next. So these 9 areas are the areas that came out of the planning work. Some of these names you may recognize. Some of the neighborhoods do currently have names. Some of them our team sort of created, such as the College Hill Gateway at Searly Boulevard and Main Street, the Southwest neighborhood. So you may not recognize the names, but we took a little creative license trying to identify areas that had really a little bit of a different character, but are all part of this study area. Next. Another aspect of the vision plan is the concept of frontages. Again, these are not regulatory, but these are ideas to help people start thinking about what future zoning changes might be in the College Hill area. These describe the size of buildings, how the buildings sit on the lot, how they relate to the street, basic parameters for windows and doors, and then some wide parameters for uses. Next. So there's a group of these frontages included in the plans. They have photos, some there in Cedar Falls, some from other places, and then each one has this green box that identifies the parameters for these frontages. Next. Jeff.
And I get to talk about the vision. Thank you. The first thing you'll notice about this vision plan is what's not drawn, and that gets to the stabilize and enhance. The undrawn part, just the aerial photograph, those are the greater area of the study area, the neighborhoods, and the big idea we got from, I would say, everyone is stabilize, enhance those areas. It's not about change. The areas that are drawn here are more the areas where we're talking about change, close in, mostly tied up to the university. There are a series of illustrative projects there that you're going to see in just a second. Some as prototypical projects that could be applied several places, and some as really specific projects for a certain spot. Think of these as what ifs. The first one is in one of those neighborhoods we're talking about, stabilize and enhance, Iowa and Searly. These are proposed sort of models of what good infill would be. The smaller of the two is a single unit house. The larger is a double unit house. You'll notice that the garages are at the back, not at the front of the building, but at the back. And they're fairly straightforward, typical houses of that area. Front porches, garages in back off the alley, simple, straightforward. This isn't about change. This is about maintaining and enhancing the character of that area. Second, this is about the idea of the Gateway College at Searly in Maine. It's the current condition, an idea that through combinations of subtle improvements in bicycle and pedestrian crossings. One of the things we heard is that there's a little bit of a disjunction between bicycling in the neighborhood and getting to the trails. This is about that improvement. And also about the kind of new development that could be in that of most of these of the same use, but a little bit more intensive, but buildings that would enhance that gateway idea. And the big idea about connecting between the upper and the lower hill, where currently there's just a big gap between the two. You might recognize College Street in the foreground between 21st and 22nd. Some pretty significant change where currently there's a gap between the two streets, two new buildings. The one on the right is, we show these as different developments because they're on different properties, multi-story buildings, most likely retail storefronts on the ground floor, 2 and 3 floors of apartments above. And if you look carefully around the back, you'll see these are parked. Care was given to park these, tucked under the building and right behind it. And here's a photo imaging of that done by Steve Price, working with us. This is a view looking north. We're standing right at that gap, the new Cloud 9 building. Actually a good sign that things are headed in a good direction. That's Banny's on the right. And through some combination at various times of public infrastructure and private investment, you can start to really build a better world. It's pro-business, pro-development, making a better place for people. And it's a combination, again, of the private investment and the public infrastructure, with parking lots being turned into buildings and making it a better people place, which is also a better business place. Back to the existing condition. Our next project, infill at the heart of College Hill. You'll notice all these projects, with the exception of the first, which was about the single and the 2-unit houses in the neighborhoods. These are really close to the university, right next to it. Matter of fact, the upper right of this image, you'll see those white buildings. That's the university itself. And this is several projects in one here. The first change shows 2 lots, both of which are developed. They could be developed independently. This project does not require lots to be combined together, but each of those lots could develop 2 townhouses, as you see here, the parking in behind them. And the next projects that come in do require lot consolidation. The first apartment building on the corner, apartment buildings on both corners, these have parking underneath and parking behind. Again, this is relatively intense housing right next to the university. Perhaps probably a 1-minute walk. You'd have to walk very slowly for it to take more than 2 minutes for you to be on the university property from here. So very close in housing, and then showing all the projects together, some of the potential for creating a walkable environment here right at the university. The second project is one that is especially fun. Right now, 23rd Street was closed some time ago because the intersections were misaligned and there were some issues there. Right now, it's really being used as a parking lot. It's kind of in between a street and a parking lot. And this looked like a great opportunity for us to turn that parking lot. It can still be used for parking during some times, but on any special event or perhaps weekends, that can be made into a plaza. It's also an opportunity to have buildings built along it that turn and face it. By the way, the buildings lining the northern side here, this is university property, and we did discuss this with them. One option for several buildings, 2 and 3 stories tall, retail on the ground floor. Notice at the end across Olive Street, there's a new apartment building there, taking advantage of the, I guess, the increased attractiveness of this plaza. And here's another version of that with more intense building right there, which could be a combination, could be offices or residences. Next view is photo imaging of that same site. This is the view that you would get today, showing the streets closed off and the buildings that it's evident that it was a street, but it's blocked off, so there's no traffic. And the kind of things that could start to happen, repaving or even just painting the surface, planting trees, minor improvements, and then new buildings built, I'd say by the private sector, but in this case, that includes a big portion of the university, and then extra improvements to the public realm, more street trees, street lights. And you can imagine how on a weekend or at a special time, say Parents' Day for the university, that becomes a festival street with tents, with different kinds of food, etc. So talk about a positive impression for potential students, parents to see right here. And now I'm going to make a big jump over to the Dry Run Creek area, pedestrian improvements and shared parking. This block was one that people most often mention as having some issues. Compared to all the other blocks in this area, it's much bigger, and it's also laid in kind of a different way. So there are a lot of issues there. To the left of this photograph is some very intense student housing. And on the right side of this photograph is one of the few stores. There are issues with coming and going with students. There's also something specific to the creek. This is the floodplain shown, and this is after recent city improvements dealing with flooding in Dry Run Creek. That's been vastly improved. So the floodplain area you see here is greatly reduced from what it was before. There is, however, still an impact on a lot of properties. And one of the things we looked at, and here going to a full drawing, is the idea of taking that, what right now is relatively only a stormwater project, and taking advantage of that creek and turning it into a natural amenity by establishing a path along it that would connect all the way from campus to Olive Street, kind of pedestrian and bicycle path. Now, what you see in the lower right photo is actually not a bricked walkway. It's actually part of the stormwater. It's pervious pavement. but it gives you some idea of how a walkway could be extended from one side to the other. Now imagine that with trees planted and lighting, et cetera, and it becomes now a very effective and safer connection between College Street and the university. Also, at the top of that, you'll see a parking lot rather, not a structure. This is the possibility in those areas that are in the floodplain, hard to rebuild or enlarge existing structures, that could be used as a common community parking area that help absorb some of the extra parking from new development. And on the bottom right is the idea, central to this proposal would be that parking lot would be done in an environmentally sensitive way. It could combine pervious paving and bioswales, et cetera, so it handled the stormwater much better than a conventional parking lot. And then a next bigger what if is the idea that that large block in the middle could be redeveloped even more, divided into blocks with new residential buildings built around it, multi-story. Also the establishment of a very wide kind of a public park here alongside the greenway that would both give value as a community-wide amenity and extra value to the units fronting that park. Also an extension down the western side of College Street. So this is the biggest what if in the project, but it is something that's very possible in the future with more intense development. And again, this is a lot of housing within a 2-minute walk of the university. So I'll recap the vision plan, big ideas. Again, for most of the neighborhood, the vast majority of the study area, stabilize and enhance. Second, concentrate and intensify the student housing near the campus where they belong, reconnect the upper and lower hill, treat natural areas as amenities, and that's adding and maintaining street trees. That's one thing we heard about changing the neighborhoods is improvement in the street trees. Manage parking better, improve walkability, improve biking possibilities, and increase the retail and dining options. Mary?
We don't hear Mary yet. Yeah, we don't hear Mary
Mary,
yet.
you're muted.
There we are.
And what I said was very brilliant. So Jeff has given you the meat of the vision plan, and the last section is the appendix, which includes the full market analysis that our team completed. It includes the various surveys that we did, the maps from the kickoff event of folks, the strengths and weaknesses, visual preference exercise that was completed. So all that is the last 20 or 30 pages of the plan document. Next. So we presented this plan on February 10th to Planning and Zoning Commission, and we posted it on the website. And from that time, for the next month and a half, we did several things, one of which was we had an online survey for folks to give us feedback on the plan document itself. And the majority of people who responded did say that this was a good framework for the future. So that was positive. Interestingly, about 57%, so more than half of the people who responded told us they had not participated in any of the visioning planning process except for completing the survey. So that was interesting that we reached a new group of folks. And then the last point that I also want to highlight that was interesting is we had almost 30% of the people who responded who said they didn't live, work, own property, or go to UNI. So that was interesting. Some of them self-identified that they were retired professors, and some said they just really were interested in the College Hill area. In addition to our web survey, we know some people communicated directly with city staff about their thoughts on the plan. And then last but not least, we had public comments on at least 2 separate meetings at the Planning and Zoning Commission. We heard very positive general support from the College Hill Partnership and UNI. In addition, as you all may have heard, we did hear some public concerns that there was insufficient outreach to involve involve various communities, Black, Indigenous persons of colors, disenfranchised communities, et cetera. And then we also had quite a few questions about the recommendations that the plan includes on managing parking on College Hill moving forward. So I want to dive back into these a couple of these things here before we wrap up next. One of the things that we wanted to highlight is that the city staff did extensive outreach as the project got underway, and then did another round of outreach after we came back and brought the project back online during the pandemic. Direct mailings directly to residential addresses, to all the businesses, and also to the property owners. So really trying to reach out to everyone who is daily in the study area. There were media announcements, interviews. The College Hill Partnership also reached out to all the local businesses. UNI included announcements on their daily web and helped us reach out to student groups. The project website has been running since January of last year. And in addition, announcements were placed on the kiosk, on the hill, on the announcement board, I think at the community center and the library, and there were posters provided to shops in the College Hill study area. So there was quite a bit of outreach done during the project. Next. But coming out of the Planning and Zoning Commission hearings and the feedback that we got, we did make some changes to the plan, and I want to just briefly go over those. One, the plan had a lot of things, I think, that were implied and not explicitly stated. So some of what we did was go back and clearly explain the outreach that was done to complete the plan, to clarify what we meant in this plan when we talked about stabilizing neighborhoods, because that seemed to have created a little bit of confusion. There is much more emphasis now on the importance of having diverse housing options and range of affordability, which ties back into the stabilizing neighborhoods as well. And a bit of emphasis on the idea of leveling the playing field between student renters and non-student rental households. And one of the things that became very evident from our market analysis is that the rental rates for houses in the surrounding neighborhoods, oftentimes, to keep the math simple, if you have 4 students living in a house and they each can pay $500 rent, then the rent on that house is $2,000 a month. There are very few families that can afford $2,000 a month for rent. Or if they can afford that, they typically are actually going to be in an ownership position to be looking to become homeowners. So that's where the plan now sort of tries to more explain what we mean about leveling the playing field between the student and non-student rental households, particularly as it relates to the neighborhoods further away from campus. Next. We also had quite a few questions about the recommendations for moving forward with parking on the Hill. One thing we want to make clear is the recommendations that are in this plan are about policy decisions for the city to consider. They are not regulatory. There are not new ratios for housing proposed in this plan document. but it is trying to present food for thought about ways to move forward if you want to unlock redevelopment potential on the Hill. We heard a lot while we were there that there have been, there was a neighborhood plan done more than 25 years ago, and there's been some change, but not a lot of change. So people just keep saying, what do we need to do to sort of jumpstart this? And our analysis and looking at the recent parking plan really shows that parking requirements create a barrier to some aspects of redevelopment. Next. This is what's in the plan. These are 4 really big ideas. One is that as we move forward with looking at the actual zoning for the College Hill study area, we should take a closer look at what the current parking requirements are and consider if those should be changed, particularly in areas within very close proximity to the university. Another one is to better coordinate parking management with UNI. We heard lots of people talk about UNI parking not sitting empty in the evenings, and that's oftentimes when the most parking is needed in the heart of the Hill with the different restaurants and bars. We did say definitely to continue implementing the parking study. A couple of changes have been made since this project got underway with the way the city is setting fees and enforcing parking in the public lots. And then as redevelopment occurs, as more housing potentially comes on close to the university, there may be a need to actually look at creating a larger, using more parking management tools as redevelopment happens. So those were big ideas that the plan recommends. They are, as I said, food for thought as this project moves forward. We did review the recent parking study for the Hill as we were asked. We did not redo the study. We didn't revisit this study. This was beyond the scope. We were talking about a neighborhood vision plan, but we looked at it closely, and I want to just highlight, Jeff, if you hit next, a couple of big things that our analysis also we saw, and this is in the plan. One is that the city parking on College Hill is less expensive than parking on campus. Less expensive as in sometimes that's actually free. And because the city parking is closer to the campus, many students, even if they have permits for the remote lots, choose to park free on the city streets. That's the basic supply and demand. It's something that the city is aware of and maybe will play a role moving forward in redevelopment is who should get to park on the street, what should the fee be, how should all of that be managed, and might that be handled slightly differently moving forward. Next. In the appendix, there's sort of a one-pager about parking ratios and what we looked at. One thing I want to highlight, Jeff talked about in the plans, he showed you where parking was and how it was configured. These prototypical projects that we illustrated are realistic projects. It doesn't mean there was a client that hired us to design a specific project, but these designs actually illustrate real-world scenarios, typical apartment square footage, the amount of square footage in the given buildings, given how many stories there are, how much could you fit on the lot, how big is a standard parking space, how do you accommodate circulation if you have on-site parking in the surface lot. So those illustrations, Jeff, if you show next. He showed you the Bonnie site, so there is surface parking at the back of the lots that's maintained behind the buildings, and then on the ground level at the bottom back of the buildings, there's also what I think Jeff described as tucked under parking. But this is all still surface parking. Our economist really has looked at this, and the cost of providing parking directly affects what you can build, as well as the space required for parking directly affects that. Again, next, Jeff. He also showed these that are closer to campus with the townhouses in the second image and the larger apartments below. Again, with the townhouses that you can park coming off of the alley in surface spaces. And then in the apartment buildings, again, a small lot, as well as potentially sort of ground level parking in the rear of these, or, you know, maybe half a story underground if you're able to deal with the topo and raising the buildings up, et cetera. But when you do this, our work, we would test out these sites. If you have this size of a building and this square footage, how many parking spaces could you fit? So next, I want to circle back to the table that you may have seen. In the configurations, the left-hand column, we were looking at if you had a three-story building or a four-story building. These we were looking at the actual size of the parcels. So the site is the column where you see the yellow, and based on the buildings as we illustrated them, how much space they take up on the lot, the number of spaces in yellow is the number that you could fit on that lot with that building footprint. The bottom that says parking sink, that's the number of spaces that could fit in the parking lot that Jeff showed you up near Dry Run Creek. So one of the things that the study has recommended is that take a look at the current requirements for parking, which on College Hill are 1 space per bedroom on site, and consider whether maybe allowing some parking to be managed off-site should be a possibility. The second column has the units in the bedrooms as drawn, so depending on whether it's the first line, 12 units, 24 bedrooms, is a 3-story building, and then 19 units, 38 bedrooms would be a 4-story building. And before anybody tells me that my math doesn't add up, some of this has to do with rounding up and ratios when you're dealing with the multiplying factors on floor square footage. As illustrated in the current parking rate of 1 space per bedroom, only one of the prototypical projects could be built as drawn with the current parking requirements. So that's really important to keep in mind moving forward. If the on-site parking were reduced to 3/4 of space per bedroom, then those that are in green could be built as configured, and the reds would still not be possible. If it were lowered to 1/2 space per bedroom or 1 space per unit, basically, if you had a 2-bedroom unit, then all of those could potentially be developed. I want to highlight, this doesn't mean no parking is provided, but this is the idea if it doesn't have to all be provided on site. If you fit it all on site, you start having multiplier effects because you have to have a certain amount of space for circulation. If you start going below grade or going above with structured parking, the price of building the parking goes up exponentially. Obviously, you could say make the footprint of the building smaller, but then all the numbers sort of start, they don't work together as well. So this is just sort of thinking about moving forward. Is there a different way to handle parking? I know there's also a big discussion about whether or not every student at UNI owns a car. Our numbers told us both from the web survey, which I know was a very small response, but it indicates that no, every student does not have a car. UNI says every student does not have a car. And if there was a system where people could live really close to the campus, you know, might some people want to rent a place, they don't have a car, they don't want to pay for a parking space. Every parking space has a dollar value attached, whether or not people think it's free. At some point, someone is paying for that space. Next. I already mentioned this. I forgot this image was in here. So the idea is, again, we're not saying bring the ratios down this far, but we're saying consider different ways to manage the parking or achieve the parking without all of it being required to be on site. If every unit or every bedroom has to have a space, then you as a city are actually requiring students who don't have cars to pay for parking they don't need. This is not magic. It's not hard science. There's going to be a little bit of art and science and figuring out how much parking do we really need, and how best can it be managed in College Hill if it enables some of this redevelopment to take place. Next. One last thing, the print on here is very small, but we had some conversation and questions when we used the expression that a project doesn't pencil out. And this is some general rules of thumb, but as I said, parking costs money, especially when you're constructing it new. New building construction costs money. So one of the things that we have learned working with market economists and working with developers is if someone has a house right now that has 4 bedrooms and has students living in it, they need to be able to come back about 3 to 4 times more intensely to be able to make the actual new construction costs pencil out or pay for themselves spread over time. There are slight variables if they already own the property, if the lot is vacant and they don't have demolition costs, depending on what sort of mortgage situation. So we know there are variables, but the cost of new construction definitely comes into play when you're figuring out how big of buildings, how intense, and how much parking you need. Next. So we covered a lot of ground. Hopefully we didn't lose anyone. I don't know, Karen, if you want to go over this or if we just want to take questions.
Yeah, leave up to the mayor whether we want to just go to questions first, but this slide is just to talk about the next steps after this process.
I think it'd be helpful to hear from that Ms. Howard first, the what's next, and then talk through.
Sure. We would anticipate that you'd have some conversation here. We have a schedule kind of laid out for this approval of the College Hill Vision Plan. We would put it on your agenda if it's okay with the council for your next meeting. If you feel like you're ready, it's ready to go, and we can have it on the agenda for approval on April 19th. That would be the next step.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Howard. We do have about 45 minutes. I wanted to provide enough time for us to have a good discussion about it because it's a complex topic. So if we'd like to start with council questions, we then would move over into any public comments and then back to final council dialogue and the moving forward. So are we looking for a motion tonight to move forward? Is that needed? Okay. So with that, open up for council questions to staff or to our consultants.
I'll start.
Yes, Ms. Dewar, Councilmember Dewar, go ahead.
I want to know why they had such a large area. Obviously, areas 7 and 8 are completely different than all the other areas on that map where you broke it into 9 territories. So why did they include areas 7 and 8 when none of your examples even apply in areas 7 and 8?
So I'll go ahead and answer that question. As you know, we're trying to update the zoning code for the entire city. So we're trying to bite off, chunks of the city. This built off of the downtown study area, moving south along Main Street. So we tried to capture everything that was north of Dry Run Creek. We kind of tried to decide the areas that, seemed like on the other side of Dry Run Creek, seems like a different neighborhood. But there was that one neighborhood, and I know that it was included in the College Hill overlay. It sits by itself there in the southwest corner. So we debated back and forth, is this really part of College Hill or not? But because it was in the College Hill overlay, we decided it was important to include it in the study area. So you're right that it is much larger than what most people think of as being College Hill.
But your portion number 8 includes about 2/3 of it that is not in the College Hill neighborhood area.
Right, so we tried to come up with a logical boundary between where we felt, the streets that are, the dividing streets are really 12th, 18th, down to University. So we wanted to take in a larger study area that matched up with the downtown, so we didn't want to leave a gap between the downtown study area and College Hill. So that's the reason we chose the boundaries that we did for the study area.
To follow up with Councilmember DeBeer's question, for that area to the southwest, we call it Panther Lane, that area, is the zoning changes and what's going to be proposed for the next steps, would that include changes in that area, since we didn't talk about that tonight, or is that fairly well being left alone this evening?
So you'll see in the plan that each of the character areas does have a little explanation of what would be anticipated, looking at the character of those particular areas. So that area sits aside there in green. And so it talks about the age of the housing that's built in that area. It seems like there's a number of housing units that probably aren't ripe for redevelopment. It has changed over time to a lot of student rentals in this area. So we didn't anticipate from the market study that there would be a lot of change in this area. So it would basically be to preserve and enhance that area as well.
Okay. Other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Cruz, go ahead.
thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, just fine. Perfect.
Okay, great. I'd like to continue speaking of the character areas here, and specifically the differences between number 3 and number 4. It's kind of interesting as I listen to this, we talk about increasing student density next to campus, but then the way number 3, University Neighborhood, is depicted here, you're leaving off a good part of the area that's way over 50% students housing already. And number 4, the yellow area, a good portion of that right now is 75% or more, some of those blocks, in student housing. I think that number 3 area, to be fair, has to be the size of the College Hill overlay, because that's where the predominance of the college students are now. And it makes sense to continue to endorse and make it easier for the students to live next to campus, because that's why they're in town. They're not in town to predominantly cater to the College Hill, even though they do in the evenings for socializing. But the focal point of the College Hill area is the university, and that's why it exists. So I think it's prudent, if we're going to talk about demand for parking and adjust parking studies and that sort of thing, to truly cover the whole area that would be predominantly students. And we're not even looking at the areas west of campus, where, of course, there's built up a number of apartment complexes, the Quarters and Gold Falls, Campus Courts, Point West, and Hillcrest. So they're close to campus as well. But I think we have to look at this area as a student area of campus, because the campus has been there for 145 years, and that area has always been the room and boarding area for students. So I think that's a critical modification we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cruz. Other questions? Yes, Councilmember Cyrus.
I'm going to need Frank's help for this. What I did, this was my first study, and I went to the landlord's meeting that they had with Farrell Madsen Group. One of the landlords said he would like to see less dense further out, higher density up by the college. And what struck me is the Farrell Madsen Group agent there said, "I wish I could pay you for what you just said." And I thought that was kind of odd. So it looked to me like it was kind of a pointed study to come up with the things, and I predicted what the study would say. And I said this to myself. Frank, could you take a look at this?
Councilmember Cyrus, I don't want to turn this into a circus, please.
It's not a circus. I sent one to Simon. Simon will go ahead and attest to it.
Would you care to open it up and read that, Councilmember Cyrus?
Could I?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Because I sent this to myself March 27th of 2020. And I just wanted to be on record. I also sent one to Simon at the same time, but his wife got excited and thought I'd sent a letter to Simon, so she opened it right away. Is that not true, Simon? And I honestly don't remember what was in it, because I only sent one and I didn't even keep a copy. But the things that I said on here, well, this is actually, this one says Councilman Simon. said this letter is in regards to the College Hill Partnership Study. The study, which was requested by College Hill Association, is one predictable way the city administration operates. And I don't mean to offend anybody by this. This is just what I happen to write. Let me elaborate. This study, which costs up $180,000, which I voted for because I wanted people to have studies of their areas, I said, will come with the following recommendation. It'll say, we need higher density of housing towards the College Hill area. The study area reached a larger area than was needed. This was done so they could show that the less dense housing was further away from College Hill. This is not intended to be studied. This was the way it is. The people conducting the study met with landlords to have them confirm this. A study consultant told the landlord, I wish I could pay you for that statement. The statement was, housing needs to be higher density closer to the college. I heard this dialogue between the two people at the Hearst Center. The study will show the specific area of College Hill will be the most walked. Well, what a surprise. That's where the businesses are located, and you must walk to get to them. This will help their cause by saying this is where people want to walk and not drive. Again, not a surprise. The consultants showed pictures of nice areas in different communities, mostly multi-level, multi-story condominiums and apartments. These were shown different times of the year, and their choices being the most favorable pictures of what was envisioned. Can conclude, what this study will no doubt show is College Hill needs a multi-level apartment building with no parking and a huge tax break. Imagine that this is a result of their study before it has been presented or published anywhere. My prediction took all of 15 minutes and I did it all for free. We need to end the nonsense over high-priced studies and do what we're elected to do. We were elected to represent and make decisions for the people of Cedar Falls and what their needs are, not for specific pet projects and developers. Thank you for your time. Dave Sayers, Councilman at Large. And I sent this to Simon, and this was a copy I sent to myself just in case something didn't come to Simon. But my only point was, and this was my first study, I had no idea, but I love College Hill. 50 years ago, when you guys are talking about 50 years into the future, 50 years ago, I was up on College Hill on my bicycle. That's how far back we go. And in the 1960s, we owned an apartment building up there that I helped my dad work on. So I've seen the changes. There was 2 gas stations at the bottom of the hill, but it's always been beautiful. The only thing I'd like to recommend, and this was just because we used to go up there to lunch all the time on College Hill, my wife and I, and the one thing we could do immediately to kind of help the image of the College Hill is run a street sweeper down there. The last time we were up there for noon lunch, there was garbage in the street. I'd like to see it kept a little more tidy.
Councilmember Sayers, I'd like to keep this
okay,
directed
that's it
to the
then.
study itself.
I read that. Thank you very much.
I'll now open it up for any public comment tonight. I understand we received a letter from College Hill Partnership in support of this plan, and if we have Catherine Sogard in tonight, I'd be happy to give her the floor if she would like it as the representative of College Hill Partnership. Is she on tonight? Okay. So, Catherine, would you like to make a statement tonight? Don't want to put you on the spot, but
I appreciate that. Thank you. I just, like we had talked about at the Planning and Zoning Commission, overall the board is in support of the overall vision. And I think thinking about this vision and how important it is to our area kind of takes me back to a conversation that I was able to have with our liaison to the university. And just, we are, the College Hill, obviously, as many of the council people talked about in their statements, is vital to the university, and the university is also vital to College Hill. And so we really hope that we can come together and look at a vision to move the hill forward. As many of you know, we have been working towards this, and I think it was also, I think there might be some information. I'm sorry, I'm in my office and we're doing some painting, so I apologize for homecoming, which is great because we're able to have an event on College Hill, which has been a long time. So just a plug, we have some wonderful homecoming window paintings up on the hill. But I think the visioning is so important for College Hill because of the desire to continue to improve, to continue to revitalize our area. And that's essentially what our whole organization is about, is promotion and revitalization of the Hill. And I think we hope to continue to do a lot of the great things that we have been doing, especially in the last several years. And we hope to continue to be able to work as a community to serve everyone to the best of the ability. And we really feel like this vision plan overall does, speak to what the community would like. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sogard. And open for, seeing on the gallery, don't appear to have any other requests for public comment. Does anyone from inside wish to speak? Yes, so Mr. Vajpayee, please come forward. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Ishan Vajpayee, 3831 Convair Lane, Cedar Falls. I am going to be here talking on behalf of the concerned citizens for College Hill, who I represent. They're a big stakeholder in this that you might not hear that much about. We mostly hear about the College Hill Partnership stakeholders, which, as I've done a lot of digging over this in a lot of years, well, not a lot of years, a couple of years, is run primarily by developers, business partners of those developers, who will make a fortune on the biggest buildings with the least amount of parking. So just keep that in perspective when the College Hill Partnership is really about this. So, as I said, the College Hill Concerned Citizens of College Hill is a group of individuals representing about $50 million of business and housing interests around the College Hill. And this is mostly already constructed stuff. They've got about 1,000 apartment bedrooms. And on the point of how much parking we need or how many people have cars, they surveyed about 900 bedrooms in their ranks, and 98% of their kids had cars. Their tenants had cars. There was the parking, or not the online survey that from the city that only managed to get about 200 or 400 people. College Hill citizens did a parking study or a survey online recently where we screened out anybody who wasn't from the College Hill or from the Cedar Valley. To give an answer to the question, you had to be from Waterloo, Cedar Falls, or part of the greater Cedar Valley. And every single question that had to do with parking, the majority leaned towards, it's already difficult to park, I stay away because it's difficult to park, and a huge majority, they've got cars. Shocking. So the group that I represent doesn't agree with some aspects of this visioning plan. They initially took part in the SHREP process and some of these visioning plans, but I think, as Councilman Sires alluded to, they felt very quickly, in their opinion, whether it's true or not, that it was already written. The study, without actually studying anything, was going to do exactly what it's been done, and they could have predicted it as well as Councilman Sires had. Bigger buildings, no parking. And as many of you remember, this was already attempted 2 years ago. 196 bedrooms, or big building, 22nd in college, required 196 bedrooms per the clear code at that time, and got right up to passage. We jumped in, stopped it with your assistance after pointing out that it was like 100 parking spots short of the code. So there's the motive. That's what they want to do. And that's why this study ended up where it is, because of who influenced the study. And through this process, there was mention that these are just suggestions in the visioning plan. This is, the code is going to come from planning and zoning and lots of different readings and revisions. but you are going to be asked to adopt the process. And veterans of this body and know that these projects and these visionings and these studies build an inertia of their own. They snowball. And one body passes it with approval, and the next body goes, well, planning and zoning liked it, I like it, and it goes back, and it becomes a sort of rubber stamping process through no one's fault, but just the inertia of the process. So I really encourage you, as I encourage the planning and zoning people to do, and I encourage you to watch their meeting to see what they said. Any adoption that you make of this visioning plan, do so with your concerns, if any, on the record specifically, so that when planning and zoning comes back and looks at zoning code proposals, they're able to do so with your concerns in mind, if you have any. And I guess, am I on the clock right now?
1 minute remaining.
Okay. And I'm probably going to speak during the council meeting too, just to grab some more time. But the big theme here is the parking study done 2 years ago says that we need, for a brewery space under one of these new buildings, typical brewery space, new dining, new retail space, you need like 26 parking spots, okay? But you're not going to park any commercial parking spots. You're not going to park any commercial need, and that's fine. But you can't not park commercial demand and then also not adequately park the residential. The parking sink is one thing, but you're already under parking every single retail space on the hill that's going to go up under these buildings because you're not going to require any of their spots. And so I really encourage you to work on implementing the parking study that you already did 2 years ago before reducing parking again. And again, remember, you just did this 2 years ago. You just reduced the parking on the hill huge. And think about that before you reduce it again, just so that they can build exactly what building they want and sacrifice the parking. How about building a building that considers how much space there is for parking? And if you look at that prototypical sheet, it shows you have to make very modest reductions in bedrooms for those buildings to meet the current parking code.
Thank you, Mr. Vashbury.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes, Mr. Frine, name and address for the record, please, sir.
TJ Frine, 1319 Austin Way. By my own admission, I missed like the first 25 minutes of the presentation. So I just had a couple questions, kind of just going over the parking stuff. The plan looks great. I mean, the pictures and the future of it looks awesome. Definitely needs an upgrade to what it looks like now. A couple questions I had just about the parking. If we lower the requirement per bedroom of parking and then supplement it with this parking sink, if you will, like, does that benefit me as a person that doesn't live on College Hill but would like to come down to go out to eat or grab a drink? That the parking sink seems to be more of like a parking place for people like me that don't live in the area but want to come down and visit. So I just think that supplementing any kind of apartment parking or housing parking for that reason would just take away parking for any visitor that would want to come down. The other thing, as we increase off-campus parking or off-campus housing per se, I just wondered if we've considered the financial impact on the university for moving students off campus. Takes away housing and room and board for students and income for the university. Affordable, the talk about affordable housing, we all want affordable places to live, but I have not been to a Regent town in Iowa that has affordable housing anywhere near campus. When I went to Iowa State, a 2-bedroom apartment within a block of the university was $1,500 a month, almost as much as most people's mortgages. So that would be a concern of turning affordable housing into college housing, which just increases the price as far as rental property is concerned. So I just hope that at least we look at parking as, you know, 1 spot per bedroom doesn't even seem to be enough right now if you've got 2 people living in the same bedroom. I just hope we don't supplement apartment complex building parking spots with community parking. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Frine. I'll take the first question for the parking sink and the lower requirements per bedroom. You had a statement on that for how you felt it should be, and so I'll consider that a rhetorical question. But the second one, financial impact for you and I, considering that it would be a potentially expanded properties around campus and might draw away from dormitories. Was that considered as part of the discussion, and how, did you and I have a stance on that?
I can let the consultants weigh in on this as well. We did have discussions with UNI throughout the process. They're very supportive of redevelopment in the area as a gateway to UNI. They have expressed some concern about that there's not a need for a significant number of new housing units because their enrollment has stayed stable or gone down. So when we talked about combining the stabilization of the neighborhoods with the idea of, one of the things that UNI said is the students do much better at school if they're live right next to campus or on campus. So they would like the housing to be concentrated close to campus or on campus from their perspective, and then supporting, of course, development of the business district as well. Well, the idea of stabilizing the neighborhoods is it relieves some of that pressure. If there's more housing next to the campus, it helps to relieve some of the pressure on the neighborhoods, that maybe opens up some opportunities. And we've already seen a little bit of that in the market right now with some of the rental properties being sold on the market. That owner to renter to owner conversion program, that sort of thing, to help stabilize some of those neighborhoods and open up the opportunities for housing for other populations and not just students. So it all kind of fits together as one package. You're thinking about the whole market, not just the campus area, but drawing some of the students then closer to campus so it relieves that pressure in the neighborhoods.
Okay, so do I understand right then, it's that for the dormitories and the spaces on campus, it wouldn't be to risk drawing those down or emptying those. It would simply be working to move students from out of the single family home area, like those dwellings, into maybe higher density.
Well, creating
right
more housing closer to campus will create the market, the opportunities for more students to live closer to campus. And that's the idea, is you let the market work then to your advantage. So I think that's the crux of the plan. And once we explained that to the university, they were like, okay, we get this whole combination of stabilizing and enhancing the neighborhoods combined with intensifying the housing near the campus. But Mary and Jeff can confirm this. The marketing study, and maybe Mary or Jeff want to talk about this market study, their economists did show that there wasn't, a huge demand for a lot of additional housing. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Harding.
All right, bear with me. I'm going to try to go through these chunks. First of all, this is a huge plan, 50 years. Thank you for the presentation. I know we seem to be hyper-focused on the parking and the housing, and I understand why, because people are trying to make money. But I want to focus for a second on some of the beautification and also the process about how we can possibly go about doing this. So there's this basic symbiotic relationship between the area and the university. The university is going down, so we don't need as much housing. And so we have this balance. We want to get more students here. So I guess ultimately, if we could focus on some of the beautification first, the trails, making possibly like a central forum type area, things like that, try to get the help support the university, because when people go to college, they don't just look at the college, they look at the area around it. And we could use a facelift here to make the area where students want to come here. They're not just going on campus and seeing the teachers, they're going, all right, where am I going to hang out? Where am I going to be? Yes, sometimes they're going to want to live in, apartment building, but you're always going to have students that want to live away from campus because it's a different lifestyle, it's a different thing. So ultimately, this is a huge process, and for us to just say, oh, we're going to do this, it's very tough. But I love a lot of aspects of this plan, so I would like to ask two questions. One of the consultants, is there a way that we could possibly focus on beautification and enhancing the area and then kind of see how the university goes and then look at the housing issues so that we don't have to focus on this and be all political and backstab each other and be crazy, and let's focus on the city and moving something forward beautifully. And the second thing would be, rather than adopt this thing, I believe we talked about this at goal setting, let's receive and file it and say we accept it, and then adopt small chunks of it and move slow so that we can work together and get something done and not just nag at each other, which is very unfortunate. So, question on, is there a possible way that we could get a beautification process, and then to staff, could we receive and file and then talk about adoption of certain aspects and move forward at a pace that more people are comfortable with?
So Ms. Howard, if you could comment on that for chunking the plan, I suppose is a way to put it, or is it one that?
Well, I'd like to have, I can't speak on my computer to the Zoom, so I can't. I was trying to indicate to Mary and Jeff when they might have things to jump in on and respond to some of the questions. I didn't want it just to be,
Sure.
coming from me. So I wanted an opportunity for Mary and Jeff to respond to some of the comments as well, if that's
Certainly,
okay.
please.
Yeah, I would love that too.
So either for Ms. Madden or Mr. Farrell, the floor is yours to respond there.
Okay, Jeff, do you want me to start? I guess so, because he's quiet.
Yes.
So I think the idea of beautification first, I mean, we love that. But I will say what we were trying to do is really look at a balanced plan, and that there's a role for the city, for the public sector, that it takes public investment. And then there's also a role for private development. And the plan like this, that they are, going in the same direction, working together, so that especially you don't want them to be working at cross purposes. I know that there are different aspects to highlight from, the stormwater management to when you rebuild streets. We know that, for example, College Street was rebuilt, I think, 12 years ago, so it's probably not online to be rebuilt until probably another 8 or 10 years, I believe, is the typical cycle. But what you would want to do with a plan like this is, if you've laid out this vision, when there is the public investment that's coming online through your CIP or something else, that it is continuing to move the plan forward. I think that there may be 21st Street may be about to be rebuilt, and so again, if it comes to putting in the sidewalks and street trees, et cetera, the idea, if you've adopted this sort of public realm visioning ideas, that any public investment, you want it to keep moving it forward. The Festival Street, or the plaza on the 23rd Street, when we talked about this during the charrette and then moving forward as we further developed the plan, one of the things that we talked about, are there ways that literally something more along the lines of the plaza could be created with minimal public investment up front? And so that was, I think Jeff mentioned this, and the plan talks about this, that there are things that you can do with actually, staining or painting the street pavement to have that plaza appearance, rather than saying we're actually going to put bricks on that street, which has serious cost implications as well as maintenance costs going down the road. So I think there are definitely aspects that could be done moving forward. We also were working closely with we met with the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and I know they had some recommendations. We started sort of diving into that more deeply, and we stepped back because we wanted to make sure the plans were, going in the same direction. And I think Jeff mentioned this. One of the things that we heard from citizens groups were just concerns, for example, that there are blocks along some of the streets in the study area that don't have sidewalks. So just making sure through the CIP plan that they're missing sidewalks, those get put in. Jeff mentioned the folks raised the idea that there are street trees that are dying and I think need to be replaced. And I think there was concern about some of the tree coverage along Searly Boulevard. So there are definitely aspects of the beautification that could be done. We also heard people complain saying some of the storefronts look tired, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, that's private property, and unless they're having health and safety issues related, then you could do something in code enforcement. But in other communities, sometimes they do have small grant programs to help people do facade improvements. There are a wide range of steps that the city could take, for beautification that it would be, much smaller steps. But they would definitely could all work together to move the vision ahead. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, just cautionary. Beautification isn't going to link the upper and the lower hill, or fill in missing storefronts in other places. So there are some issues. It's a public-private partnership, and there know the days of LBJ and big government grants to really make significant changes have been over for a few lifetimes. So there's some things you can do with beautification, and I think maybe the plaza on 23rd is the best example of how far you could go, but that plaza really is not much until the buildings actually start to face it and engage it and activate it. It's the private buildings that activate the public space. That's something to remember.
One other comment that I would have to your question, Mr. Harding, is that the plan is aspirational. The plan is intended to be for 20 plus years. And so any step that we take toward, the plan is to be there to guide your decisions. If programs come forward, if policies come forward that are then consistent with the plan, the idea is that's guiding your actions into the future, and also provide some guide for redevelopment from the private sector. So both of those factors put together could help move everything forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding.
Is it possible to possibly receive and file, and then just take some more time to go through the plan and pick what we as a council really want to adopt and move forward with? Or is it an all or nothing thing that staff's looking for?
I think when you originally set of course that's up for the council to decide. When you set the goals, the policy goals at the beginning of the project, the idea was to help the whole thing move forward to then look at some new zoning for this area that would help implement the plan as well. So I think it would be difficult to just pick out different aspects and do it piecemeal. The idea is that it would be aspirational for all these pieces to work together. So it's of course up to the council, but I'd have you kind of look back at your priorities that you set at the beginning of the project.
Mr. Mayor.
And that would be an option for the motion to state whether you wish to do the motion for a adoption or a receive and file. So that's the council's decision. Yes, Councilmember DeBeer?
Well, I had a question going back to the parking, if I can. We do have an apartment building that's on Area 2 or on 23rd Street that didn't require the parking. And we found that created problems with our municipal parking lot, as the occupants found ways to get around instead of parking off in the distance somewhere. So my question is, how does going to a 3/4 parking or a 1/2 parking create a better situation? We've already got one that's shown us that did not work.
So that is one of the questions that was tackled in the parking study, to take a look at how do we manage our public parking in a way that prevents what you're talking about occurring. And I think our parking study, Jackie and that group that are on the parking study committee are trying to move forward with some of those policies by making it paid parking in the lot there so that people can't park all day, so you can't park overnight in those lots. So tried to tackle some of those issues that had been a problem in our public parking lots, also coordinating with the University of Northern Iowa, as both the parking study and this study showed is coordination is one of the key factors. And if they're charging much more for parking than the city's providing free parking, just, human nature, people are gonna park where they can get free parking. So we really need to really look at the incentives that we're creating in our public parking lots to prevent basically people from doing what we don't want them to do.
Well, that parking situation was based off of what we currently have with the four parking spots per bedroom requirement. So when you drop it to 3/4 or half, aren't we exasperating the problem?
So it depends on how you manage it, right? It depends on how, and that's what the study is showing, that it's not just one approach. It's not just to provide the parking on site, but it's lots of different approaches that you would take to work together toward that solution. That in an urban area like that, there's a lot of different solutions you have to look at to manage and have people behave the way you want them to behave. So I think maybe Mary and Jeff have a comment about that.
Karen, I will add, and I tried to highlight this, and maybe I failed, so I apologize. Which is, there's a lot of parking that the city owns and controls that is being given away for free, if I put it bluntly. So you have parking in the lots that people are paying for. You have parking on many of the streets in the area that nobody's paying for. So right now, the city is subsidizing university students and university employees to park for free or for minimal cost. So we also heard exactly the situation that you've described, that there were people who paid for a permit in the remote lot out by the dome, but they very quickly realized, well, hey, I can park on a street 1 block away, or I can park in a lot 1 block away, and I don't care that I'm paying for a remote space. I'd rather be closer, and, it's free. We met students who told us they lived, say, in that neighborhood number 8 in the Southwest, who literally told us that they drive up into the area around 3, just northeast of the campus, and park for free on the street because that's closer to their classes. And they've done the math that parking for free and getting a couple of tickets a semester is cheaper than paying for a permit, not to mention the commuter permit lot up by the dome is about a half mile away. So why park a half mile away if you can park 2 blocks away for free? So we heard all that very, very loud and clear. We also heard from people who said, they're paying for a space in their building that they don't need because they don't have a car, they have a bicycle. So the really big question is the university parking, the city parking, how close people want to park for free, and once you get out of the immediate, the heart of College Hill, which I think everyone agrees the on-street spaces there should be short-term parking for people going to the businesses, restaurants, etc. They shouldn't be for people parking all day to go to campus, and they shouldn't be for people parking all day because they live in the apartments. So that's where we said longer term. Right now, the parking study says there is not a parking problem for the publicly owned parking currently. That does not address Mr. Vajpayee's study about all the different apartments and who parks in their lots and who gets towed, et cetera. But that's why we recommended that as redevelopment comes online, which we think would be a good thing for College Hill and for the city of Cedar Falls, probably something along the lines of a parking management district should be considered. And that is a multifaceted approach. But I don't think you start with that because right now you don't have the redevelopment yet.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cruz, and we are close to the end of our time, so I'll ask for further comments. Just to be
Okay,
brief.
I want to zero in on what Mary was saying there, because all indications that I've seen and my experience around the College Hill for the last 30 years would indicate that we need a resident-only parking system right now, because you just described examples of students driving in from a mile away and parking for free and taking up the spaces where the current residents could use, and going to the prototypical projects here where you have 3/4 of a parking spot per bedroom. Those students that would rent those are just going to fill the streets all around up into 17th and 16th Street and over to Searly Park and the whole College Hill overlay. To me, I like Simon's idea of receive and file this, study this over a little bit more, and discuss some options. I don't think we're ready to jump in here and be changing codes and promote building when the campus hasn't recovered from COVID, and it may not recover from COVID because there's a lot more emphasis on online class taking. And I hear that from discussion with students that I have every semester. So what was the other thing? Some of these areas, the term that we use in economics is highest and best use. And the highest and best use of residential property within a 2-minute walk from campus, like Jeff said, if you go directly east, you can get a 2-minute walk probably to Franklin, maybe even further. But as I said earlier, the number 3 area where we want the density of students to be needs to be increased if you want to use that 2-minute walk and put a circle around campus. But remote parking won't work. It doesn't work for downtown Cedar Falls. We get complaints all the time as city council members. And remote parking is not working for the university now because of the remote parking lots that they have that are not getting utilized. So I don't know why they would work any differently for a high-rise apartment building in the number 1 and number 2 areas. It's just you can do the same thing incorrectly how many times, it's still incorrect. But I'm in favor of receiving and file this, and then let's pick it apart further with more discussions and maybe more work sessions.
Thank you, Councilmember Cruz. Councilmember Dara?
The one thing that this council is really good at is picking things apart. And so we could do that. But my definition of a vision is just that. And Karen mentioned that this report that's in front of us tonight, yes, has a lot of detail in it, but ultimately it's a vision for what we would love to see. It's aspirational. What is the potential up there? All of these things about parking, we know parking's going to always be a problem, and we could give people free parking every place and they still couldn't find a place to park. So that's never going to be resolved. But if we sit here and nitpick things that are going to be discussed in further committees and that kind of stuff without a vision, then we're not going to get anywhere. To me, what we're doing tonight is approving, or at least having a discussion about approving, something that the majority of us would like to see if everything falls into place. But there's work that has to be done to get there. But without a vision, it's just going to be more meetings like this. So why do we not just have a vision for what we would love to see up there and then go to work on how we make it happen? And it's never going to be perfect. And there's always going to be, parking's always going to be a problem. But if we just say, well, let's receive and file, and as Darrell says, pick it apart some more, let's pick it apart after we know where we want to go. So I don't know if we're supposed to vote on it tonight. Are we voting on approving this tonight?
No, this is an informational presentation this evening, and then typically what a plan does is it's on either the next meeting or a following to vote for adoption, consider that adoption.
I guess I would just encourage the council to start thinking somewhat out of the box. Yeah, there's always problems with everything, but what has made Cedar Falls what it is being able to visualize what it could be. And if we continue to pick things apart, we'll never get there. So I think it's, to me, us agreeing what a vision is.
Mayor.
Okay, yes, Councilmember Miller, you've not spoken yet.
I Similar thoughts to Frank's there. I don't know how you, I mean, to Councilman Harding's point too, in order to get staff to move forward with the beautification stuff, piecemeal, I mean, there isn't gonna be a gigantic chunk of money sitting here that says, let's go rebuild College Hill. It's gonna have to happen on CIP. It's gonna have to happen on sidewalk programs. It's gonna have to happen on the Olive Street box culvert. Those type of things are the only way that this stuff is gonna happen without a sizable private investment. And I think ultimately that's what you end up with this too, is a public partnership or public-private partnership in order to move some things along. And the parking stuff isn't going to be resolved. I kind of resigned myself to that. And I think we can keep talking. I mean, there's always going to be things that aren't perfect with this stuff, but the bottom line is the only way to get to a vision that the public is comfortable with is to involve the public. And there's some criticism here that we don't need to hire consultants, we don't need to do this stuff. But it's critically important, in my opinion, that we get the public's involvement. And I don't know how else you do that, because the amount of time it takes, the amount of effort it takes to do all of the things, to send the letters, to invite the public, to hold the charrettes, to do all that stuff, our staff can't do that. So I don't love spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on things either, but that piece of it has to be included to get the public buy-in on this stuff and for everybody to have the opportunity to speak their mind on it. And this is how we have to go about it.
Thank you, Councilmember Miller.
Mayor.
We are running low on time here to reach our 7 o'clock. If there's anything that we would need to know before moving, or if it can wait until, I guess the 19th is when we're looking to have this before council. A motion's not required for it for tonight. So it will be before council again for discussion in the week or 2 weeks from now. So any closing comments needed?
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
That parking has never stopped me from going somewhere that I want to go. I go to College Hill all the time. I go there up to the gas station. I go there to the drinking establishments. I go there to the eating establishments. I go there to the retail establishments. I've never stopped going to College Hill because of parking. I will say this, I go there at all times of day. I lived there for 7 years, like 20-some years ago. I lived right on 23rd Street and on Walnut Street. College Hill, I think what we need to remember is we want our businesses to thrive up there. And a thriving business district creates a vibrancy that is what drew me to want to come to UNI. And then I ended up staying in this city for 20-some years now. So I echo all the good things that have been said about this. I appreciate the hard work, and I feel like we need to give College Hill its due. It's not my aunt and uncle lived or owned businesses on College Hill for decades, and it was often known as the stepchild that nobody wanted to really give attention to, and it deserves its attention.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Dunn. So with one last closing comment for Councilmember DeBeer.
Yeah, my problem with this remains that the area is too large. It doesn't seem like the vision includes the homeowners. And obviously areas 4, 7, and 8 all have a lot of homeowner occupied homes. And I just don't see a lot in the vision for that. I would have preferred to see the vision narrow it down to the business district, like Ms. Dunn is talking about, to areas 1, 2, and 3, instead of including all this large additional area.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember DeBeer. With that, this will be the end of this part of the discussion, and I want to thank our consultants tonight for joining us and for viewers as well. Certainly a topic for continual discussion. And seeing as we are at about 3 minutes before, we'll give Channel 15 a chance to reset and re-adjourn in approximately 5 minutes. So thank you very much, and we are adjourned.